friends, welcome back to my channel. I hope that you're doing well. Welcome to another video and welcome to my best books of 2024. Oh my gosh, the fact that I am sitting down filming this video is absolutely insane, but it is finally time for me to talk about the best books that I read in 2024. I'm gonna be real honest with you. This was a hard list for me to come up with because I read so many books over the course of 2024 that narrowing it down to a small enough and digestible enough video for you guys to consume was tricky. But I think that I have come to a solid conclusion on what I wanted to feature in today's video. That being said, my number is probably going to be bigger than most. I'm going to be sharing my top 24 of 24 because I read 224 books in 2024, which is such a fun number to say. And whittling that down to a top 10, that was tricky. And I think that over the course of the year, I had close to 60 5-stars. So yeah, it just made it a little difficult for me to pick from those, but I'm very happy to be sharing my top reads with you guys today. I'm choosing to do things very dangerously today because this is the first sit-down video that I'm filming with my new mic, so I'm hoping that everything sounds okay. Crossing my fingers because I don't really want to refilm this. But without further ado, let's talk about the 24 books that I absolutely loved this year. Okay, until we get into my top 5, these are in no particular order just because I could not pick a final order. So let's start with number 24, and that is What Lies in the Woods by Kate Alice Marshall. I am the most surprised of anyone to be sitting here and telling you that on my favorites of the year list is a thriller. If you guys have been following my channel for any length of time, you guys know I am a romantasy and romance girly through and through. I will read other things here and there, but romance and romantasy are my bread and butter. It's what I love. So the fact that I'm sitting here telling you that a thriller ended up in my top 24 after reading 224 books this year is insane. And I'm so excited and happy to say this because this is actually a recommendation that I got from Dana and Nikki, and I knew that I needed to pick it up. So back in October when Dana and Nikki hosted a readathon, I decided to pick up a recommendation from them, and I loved it. It was my first 5-star thriller that I've ever given out, and it was such a fun ride. So What Lies in the Woods is a thriller following 3 girls who went through something absolutely intensely tragic in their childhood, and it is years later, I believe like 10 or 15 years later, and they are coming back in a group in their hometown to discuss the passing of the man that committed this horrendous crime. However, there are a lot of secrets still hidden between these 3 girls that is intensely tied to the night that they were attacked, and it is up to the main character, Naomi Shaw, to kind of delve deeper into those secrets, figure out how much she's willing to share for the people that she loves, and when another body turns up on their doorstep, things get much more intense. And oh my gosh, this book was just so intense. It was so fun. It was fast-paced. It was definitely a darker read just based on the subject matter and what happened to these girls that night, but of the thrillers that I have read, this was the thriller that kept me the most engaged, that kept me on the edge of my seat. I was jaw-dropped until the end. The twists and turns had me just holding my breath, waiting to figure out what was going to happen next. And overall, it was just such a fun read. I liked the fact that this had a little bit of a romantic element in the story, which is not a huge part of the plot, but it is there. And that definitely helped, I think, with my engagement into the story because I was definitely rooting for these characters. And overall, I just had so much fun with the story as a whole and with the writing that I would definitely pick up a Kate Alice Marshall book in the future, as well as I'm hoping at some point in 2025 I can pick myself up a physical copy of What Lies in the Woods because I enjoyed it that much. I'm just realizing if it takes me that long to talk about a singular book, we're going to be here for a while, so hopefully this video is not super long. But let's talk about number 23, and that one is The Fabric of Our Souls by K.M. Mornova. This is the first book that I read by this author. I have read one since and didn't love it as much, but The Fabric of Our Souls did something to my soul. I love this book so much. It's definitely a dark romance read in ways that aren't what you think of when you think of dark romance. I think when a lot of people think dark romance, they think mafia, they think lots of killing, they think lots of death, lots of blood, lots of gore, and lots of like kinky stuff, which I'm not saying that this book didn't have that. It's just not the centric plot of the story. This one follows a 20-something-year-old woman who ends up in a psychiatric facility for people that need extra attention and care. She goes into this facility because her brother basically like ships her over there after an event where she tries to unalive herself, and she is in this place where a lot of other people are undergoing lots of dark and hard times in which they are questioning whether or not they want to stay in this world. And it is a relationship between her roommate, a boy that she meets in this psychiatric ward, and they have this very intense and latching relationship. They rely a lot on each other to get through the dark days, and it is a relationship between them. But there's also some found family aspects to this with a friendship at the center between the two main love interests as well as his best friend, and it is just so good. This is definitely one that has a little bit more of a mystery aspect to it. I would even go as far as to call this a romantic suspense, but this book was just so beautiful. It was so heart-wrenching, it was so macabre, it was so dark, it was so gloomy, but throughout it I kept finding little pockets of hope and beautiful, intense writing that made me feel so much for the characters that I couldn't help but root for them until the very end. And this book absolutely fucking broke me. I sobbed, I cried at like midnight finishing up this book, and I read this one with my eyeballs. If you guys know anything about my reading, I'm not a huge physical reader. I listen to a lot of audiobooks and do a lot of immersion reading, but at the time when this book came out, the audiobook was not available, and so I did read this one physically, and I absolutely fell in love with the story, the writing, the characters, and I cannot wait to see what Kaya Morinova comes out with next. Okay, at the number 22 spot is our first sequel of this video, and that is Foxglove by Adeline Grace. I loved this book so much. This is the sequel to Belladonna by Adeline Grace. This one follows a young girl named Signa who has spent her life surrounded by death. Every person that has come into contact with her that is in a caregiver role has unfortunately passed away in either mysterious or non-so-mysterious circumstances, but she is tired of losing the people that she loves. However, she finds some long-lost relatives in an estate that she travels to, and when she gets there, she finds that she has an intense attachment to these characters, but one of the characters is suffering from a very rare illness, which she is circling the drain, and right before she had come to this estate, the mother of the girl that is currently sick had just passed away from the same type of illness. And so she is determined to turn her luck around and figure out what is causing the ailments of this family, and she definitely uncovers some secrets in the midst of all of that. There's also a very interesting relationship between her and Death. Death is very much personified as a real human person. Well, I wouldn't go as far as say human, but he is Death, and he is that guy. He is, yes, incredible. A book boyfriend, to say the least. I love this book so much. It was very different. It was very gothic. The vibes were so immaculate. The atmospheric writing to this story lended so well to the book as a whole, and I just loved my experience reading the second book. I'm not going to talk too much about the second book because it does definitely leave off on the cliffhanger from the first book, and you follow those events as we lead into book 2. But Foxglove was so good, and as much as I loved Signa and Death in book 1, I found to adore them even more in book 2, even though their relationship was not at the forefront of the story. However, the interactions between the two of them that bolstered my feelings for them felt so intense and felt so palpable that I could not help but fall in love with them even more in book 2. And there's definitely some twists and turns that keep you on the edge of your seat in book 2 that I just had so much fun with. So I cannot wait to read Wisteria. It's definitely on my list for this year, and hopefully I love it. Sitting at number 21 is The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. I feel like this one was beloved so much back in 2023, if it was even published that long ago. I don't remember, but I do remember Karina reading this one and absolutely loving it, and I put it off for so long. And then in my in-person book club, they picked this book for us to read, and I was hesitant to say the least, but super excited to pick it up. And then when I did, I was absolutely blown away. This book follows Clementine, and after the passing of her late aunt, who she loved dearly, she is basically gifted in her will a apartment. And the only rules with living in this apartment is don't fall in love. And that is because this apartment slips 7 years into the past, and she ends up interacting with someone in the past in that apartment for which she is struggling not to fall in love with. And it's just such a wonderful, amazing story of love and resilience and the power of a connection between two characters. And I just loved this book so much. It made me laugh, it made me cry, it made me gasp at times when I realized the connections that this author had so intricately woven into the story, and I just loved it so much. I never thought that a magical realism romance story would be something that I was intensely ready to pick up, but since reading this one, I think that I need to be picking up more stories like this because I just fell so hard for these characters because I was rooting for them so much because the magical realism aspect was really tearing them apart, and I just loved it. I loved it so much. It was so beautiful, and I cannot wait to reread this as well as read more of Ashley Poston's work in the future. Sitting at number 20 is another sequel, and one that I wasn't expecting to end up in my favorites list, only because I'd heard such mixed reviews from my besties about this book. And that's because one of my besties loved it, and one of my besties hated it. And so I was really scared of what I was going to think of this book. Surprisingly, I picked it up on a whim as a mood read, and I picked it up as one of my last reads of December, and it ended up in my favorites list, and that is Caught Up by Liz Tomforday. Oh my goodness, this book was so good. This is the third book in the Windy City series, for which we read books 1 and 2 in 2023 for the Sweeney readers, and we loved those as well. And so I was apprehensive to pick this one up just because I heard such mixed reviews, but I loved the first books so much that I was like, there's no way I'm gonna hate it, right? Right, I didn't. This one follows Kai and Miller, and Kai is a single dad. He was thrust into parenthood unexpectedly 6 months after his son was born, and the mother of the child decided that she did not want to be a parent. And so he was kind of forced to be a single parent, and he is a very well-known and very admired baseball player. He's a pitcher for the Chicago team. I don't remember what the team is called. I'm blanking on that information, but he is a pitcher and he is very well known. And back in the day, he was known to be a flirt. He was very fun. He was very outgoing. And since having his son come into his life, he just doesn't know how to be that fun-loving, happy man anymore because he's so focused on being a phenomenal dad. And then Miller is a chef. She's going through a lot of changes in her life. She has quit or walked away from her last job because of some unforeseen circumstances, but she needs a break. She's burning out from her very high-pressure chef life, and she ends up being the nanny for Kai's son, reluctantly on both ends. Neither one really wants to do it, especially because Kai is so overprotective of his son. But the relationship between Miller and Max, Kai's son, has warmed him up to the idea that maybe she isn't as bad as she seems. They are very different personalities. She is very snarky and doesn't have a lot of qualms about living her life to the fullest, and he is very reserved at this point in his life, and he just wants to keep his son safe. And the relationship between Miller and Max, and then the relationship that then forms between Miller, Max, and Kai is just top tier. And I loved seeing Kai fall for Miller, even though they had made it very clear from the beginning that they did not want any attachments because Miller had to go back to her job at the end of a 6-month hiatus. And so I just ate this up. I ate this up. It was so beautiful. It was so good. I will say the thing that one of my friends did not like about this book, I definitely noticed when listening to the audiobook, but I was rooting for the characters so much that I easily pushed myself past that, and I just fell in love with the story. I love the characters. I love the side characters. I cannot wait for the next 2 books in this series, and overall I just had so much fun with this fun single dad nanny romance. We're only 5 books deep, and I already have to readjust because my feet are falling asleep. We love this for us. Okay, book number 19 is one that I was teetering on the edge of whether or not to put on my favorites, but I keep thinking about this book so often that I feel like it was almost impossible for me not to put that on here, and that is Gothikana by Rue Nix. This was definitely a fun and interesting read. This is a dark academia professor-student romance in a college setting. They are both older characters, and it's definitely a darker twist on what I would think of as a taboo romance, just because this school that they go to and that he's teaching at is very much known for having a lot of disappearances, a lot of deaths. There's a lot of death and destruction in the wake of this school's history, and somehow Corvina ends up at the center of this, and with a tangle of chemistry, her and Vad become much closer than they need to be, especially because there are definitely rules that are in place about teachers and students fraternizing, as you would quite clearly think, but the chemistry between the characters and the mystery at the center of the story was just so captivating that I literally couldn't put the book down. Again, this is a book that I picked up on a whim, not necessarily knowing that I was going to read it, but absolutely fell in love with the writing style and the story as a whole, and I was just so sucked in by the writing that I could not put it down. And when I did have to put it down, I couldn't wait to pick it back up. So this was a story that I had so much fun with. Again, I know this is one that has pretty mixed reviews, but for me personally, I had a blast from start to finish. I was rooting for the characters. I thought that the romance at the center was so dark and sexy, and I just had so much fun with it. So it's definitely one that I could see myself rereading in the future because the quotes in this book were phenomenal. But I also can't wait for Rue Nix's next book that I believe is set around the same type of idea, a different school, but maybe set in the same world. I'm not really sure, but I am definitely excited to pick it up. Okay, sitting at number 18 is a book that I am so excited that I get to talk about because I feel like everybody last year was talking about this book and I wasn't. And then in 2024, I was like, it's the time to pick it up. And that is Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. This is a story that I did not think that I was going to love as much as I did, but something about the writing of this book was absolutely phenomenal. This is a cozy fantasy that I did not expect to just sit into my heart and nestle in and just want to stay there forever. I know, I heard so many people talking about it, but I had never really read a cozy fantasy up until this point, and so I didn't know if I was also going to fall in love with it. Actually, that's a lie. I read House on the Cerulean Sea. Okay, TJ Klune aside, I had not read any other cozy fantasies, and I just wanted to know what the hype was about. And something about watching Viv find a home in the most unexpected places was just so beautiful. So this one follows Viv. She's an orc and she has spent her life being a mercenary and you know, killing people as a way to make her money, but she decides to retire and settle down, and she wants to open up a coffee shop. That being said, nobody has ever heard of coffee in this small town for which she is building her cafe. She so spends the time to get to know the people of the town. She builds this cute little cafe, and she finds unexpected love along the way. I just loved this book so much. It was so cozy, it was so beautiful. I loved the magic that was very much prevalent at the forefront of the story, but didn't feel like it was overtly the only reason why we were reading this fantasy novel. I loved the friendships that were built between the characters, and I really just enjoyed watching all of these characters find a place and a home in this cafe that nobody ever expected to be built. And something about a found family, deeply romantic story that wasn't intended to be deeply romantic just hit my soul in ways I wasn't expecting, and I loved it. I fell in love with the story and in love with the characters. I didn't necessarily love the second book in the series or the prequel, but the first book definitely holds a special place in my heart. Okay, coming in at number 17 is Fragile Sanctuary by Catherine Cowles. This is not the only Catherine Cowles that you will see on this list, and it's not surprising. She has quickly pulled up as one of my favorite authors of all time, and I just love reading her books so much. And this is a book that I was highly anticipating because we did meet the main male character in a past series from her, in the Lost and Found series, and I was just so excited to get to know his story. This book follows Anson and Rhodes, and Rhodes has been through a hell of a time. She has had some very difficult things in her past that have caused her to be very afraid of the world around her and very skeptical of the people that come into her life. And Anson has just been through it. He has a very peppered past with crime, not necessarily for himself, but he was a very high person in the FBI and has some scars and some PTSD from that past life. And the two of them end up being very close because Anson is Rhodes' brother's best friend and also the newest contractor working on the house that she is trying to rebuild. And she doesn't want to become close to him. He's grumpy, he's very closed off, but when some new and dangerous things start popping up in this town that surround Rhodes, Anson becomes very protective of Rhodes and wants to do anything in his power to keep her safe, and somehow they end up in each other's paths in more ways than one, and the chemistry between the two characters was just top tier. This is one of Catherine Cowles' more emotional books. I definitely feel like she has honed in on what PTSD and loving somebody through that looks like. She's done that in several books at this point, and I just love the way that she continues to grow upon that idea and take it into a romance that feels so romantic and swoony, but also you feel the emotions in every page that you turn. And I just love Catherine Cowles' work. These characters really popped off the page. I love them so much. Their story was incredible. I haven't read the next book in this series just yet, but I'm so excited to pick it up, and hopefully it'll be another fave for 2025. Okay, coming in at number 16 is a series as a whole, because I didn't feel like I could talk about one without talking about the rest of them, but I can't really talk about the rest of them without talking about book one. Hopefully that makes sense. That being said, I didn't actually read book one in 2024. I read it in 2023, and I read the rest of the series in 2024. So that is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. Another thriller on this list? I know. No one is more surprised than me, but I loved this series so much. I gave the first book in this series when I read it in 2023 a 4-star. I really enjoyed it. I had so much fun with it. But then I read books 2 and 3 as well as the novella that comes at the end, or if you read it first, then it's the prequel to the series as a whole, and I gave them all 5 stars. I had so much fun with the series as a whole. It was so engaging, so unputdownable. I feel like the YA of it all kind of lends to my ability to kind of suspend my disbelief on some of the more quirkier things that Holly Jackson chose to do with these characters and the storyline, but something about the writing in this was so compelling that I didn't even care when it got a little interesting towards the end. But this one follows Pip, and in the first book she is tasked with writing a school project or coming up with a school project, and she decides to look into a disappearance of a young girl, Andy Bell, that happened several years prior to the start of the story. And one of the people that's in her class, his brother, was the one that was accused of it, and then according to how everything played out, he killed himself because he couldn't live with the guilt of having been the person that killed Andy Bell. And so she goes on a deep dive to figure out exactly what happened because she doesn't think that everything lines up. And in this time, she also starts a podcast for which she talks about the steps for which she goes about trying to figure out what happened to Andy Bell. And it is such a fun and fast-paced case that keeps you on the edge of your seat, keeps you guessing. I didn't have a singular guess until the very end of the story, and I didn't care. I didn't care that I couldn't guess it because I was was having so much fun. And the second and third books definitely get darker as you progress. A lot is going on in Pip's life, and she's definitely struggling and reeling from the after effects of all of this dark stuff that she's now been thrust into. But she has a good head on her shoulders, and she has good people behind her that are willing to go 10 toes down for her. And I just love this series so much. It was so fun, and I just can't believe that I blew through it as quick as I did and loved it as much as I did, that I'm excited to read more from Holly Jackson in the future. Okay, coming in at number 15, I know for a lot of people this book did not work for them. Personally, for me, it worked 100 times over, and that is Not in Love by Ali Hazelwood. This is definitely very different from any of the other books that she has written previously. It was definitely more based on physical attraction and the sex of it all than some of her other books, but something about the way that the story was written was top tier for me. So this one follows Rue, and she is very much well aware that her life is not built for love. She doesn't want it, she doesn't need it, and she's very happy where she's at. She has a very successful job at a biochem startup that she loves. She has some really incredible friends that she relies on every single day and loves so much, and she doesn't need anything else. But there's a hostile takeover at her job that is forcing these secrets out in the open, and she is definitely questioning the life that she has. And she finally finds somebody that she's attracted to. However, it's the one person that she shouldn't want because it is one of the leaders of this hostile takeover. And she just can't deny the attraction that she has to him. And she is so tired of fighting it that she says, caution to the wind, only a no strings attached, friends with benefits, frenemies with benefits situation, and they can go about their regular lives. However, it becomes a little more entangled than that. And I just love this story so much. You find two characters that are very opposite of each other. Eli wants to love Rue in ways that Rue doesn't want Eli to, and it's a really push and pull relationship between the two of them, willing to push outside of their comfort zones and see something for what it is and see the relationship for what it is. And something about the way that these two characters communicated and talked to each other was just so beautiful. The chemistry on page, the sex scenes were top tier. Everything about this book was just so fun. I happened to be reading it the week that I met Ali Hazelwood again. I think for this is the third time that I've seen her, and I was just having so much fun with it, and it just brought so much joy to my life being able to pick up another one of her stories. I think at this point I'm completely caught up on her backlist, except for maybe one short audiobook novella, but other than that I have loved everything Ali Hazelwood has written, and I cannot wait to read Deep End when it comes out this year. Number 14, what a surprise, because this was my last read of 2024. It was also an eyeball book, and I fucking loved it. Oh my gosh, I loved it so much. It was Bourbon and Lies by Victoria Wilder, and oh my god, this book was sexy, it was hot, it was fun, it was fast-paced, and I had a great time. So this one follows Lainey and Grant. Lainey is in the WITSEC program after something terrible happens in her life, and she's forced to go into WITSEC undercover to keep herself protected. And the agent that is covering her case drops her off in this small town of Kentucky called Fiasco. And she's definitely kind of dropped in with no real direction about where she's going, but B, who is her agent, has some kind of connection to the home where she gets dropped off, and that is the Fox brothers. They are very well known in this town for having a curse that whoever loves them will die. And the main character, Grant, has definitely been subject to that curse. 5 years prior, the person that he was in love with ended up getting killed in the line of duty, and he quits his job as a cop and goes into working at the bourbon plant where this Fox family has built their reputation. They are very well known for being the best bourbon in the world, pretty much. And Grant is very good at keeping to himself. He wants to lay low. He doesn't want anything else to disrupt his life after the tragic passing of his girlfriend at the time. But when Lainey shows up and kind of rips that in two, he is forced to confront a chemistry that he hasn't felt in so long. And between the two of them, it was fiery. It was a slower paced romance that I just loved so much. There was so much banter between the characters. The characters felt very real and palpable. They popped off the page. And the family at the center of this story, the Fox family, was incredible. This entire series does follow the Fox brothers, and I just cannot wait to read more from this series. In fact, I'm already reading book 2 because I loved book 1 so much. And the fact that I read this with my eyeballs and kept so engaged with the story over that long period of time for which I read it shows a lot about the story and how compelling it was to read. I love the characters so much. There was a lot of emotional turmoil that happened between the characters that they had to confront that I believe was touched on very well, and overall I just had so much fun with the story, and I'm excited to read more of Victoria Wilder's work in the future. Okay, sitting at number 13 and 12, we have the Rose Hill series by Elsie Silver. I love this series so much. It's so freaking good. And I genuinely cannot choose which book I love more. Wild Love was so incredible. I had so much fun with it. And Wild Eyes was so incredible when it came to the single dad aspect of it all. Both of these books are small town single dad romances, and ooh, I just love them. They both also feature music in some way, shape, or form. In the first book, we follow Ford as he's coming back to his hometown in Rose Hill to build up a small recording studio, because after living in the big leagues, he decides that he wants something smaller that he can immensely control. And then we have Millie, and she is coming back to the small town, and she needs a job. And she knows that Grant will give her the job because they were friends growing up. And, well, frenemies, I would say. They have some past, and it is their relationship between the two of them. And then Grant finds out that many years after he donated to a sperm clinic that he has a biological daughter, and that daughter, her mom, is really going through it after the loss of her husband, and she turns to him for help. And it is a single dad romance situation between that family, and that one was really good. I had a lot of fun with the characters and the banter and the romance. It was so beautiful. And then we have Wild Eyes, and this one follows Skylar. She is a recording artist, and she comes to Rose Hill to kind of escape from the cacophony and the chaos of her life, and she ends up meeting Weston, who is a single parent to 2 young kids, and they both have some things in their past that make it hard for them to connect with people, especially Weston. He is very particular about who he chooses to trust with his children, and somehow Skylar just burrows herself into his heart and the hearts of his children, and they just create this really swoony, unbelievably romantic romance that I just had so much fun with. I think if I had to pick one over the other, I would have to choose Wild Eyes over Wild Love. I just felt like book 2 was a lot stronger in the single dad aspect, which is something that I really love. But overall, they are both really good, and I'm so happy that I can add them to my list. All right, number 11 is The Dixon Rule by Elle Kennedy, and oh my gosh, I loved this book so freaking much. There is a scene in this book that lives in my head rent-free. I could visualize it as if I wrote it. That's how freaking good it is. This is a fake dating hockey romance between Diana Dixon and the neighbor that she hates, Shane. It is a relationship between the two of them. They end up fake dating when Shane's ex-girlfriend comes into town with her new boyfriend, and he's like, oh shit, you know what's so funny? I also have a girlfriend. She'll be by later. And then he texts Diana, and he's like, yeah, actually, come over, I need you to be my fake girlfriend. And they draw up a plot where, obviously, it's fake dating, and she is trying to actually send a message to her ex-boyfriend that she doesn't want to be involved at all in any way, shape, or form with him after some things go down. And it is a relationship between the two of them. This is a thicker book. It's definitely thicker. And they fall into more of like a friends to benefits situation well before any real feelings start to pop up. But when they do, they are undeniable. And both of the characters find it so hard to fight the feelings that they have for each other, even though they know that they should. That was a lot of words that just scrambled together. I hope it made sense. But I just love this book so much. The chemistry between the characters, again, the banter was incredible. I can't tell you how many times I laughed out loud reading this book. In fact, I laughed so loud that I embarrassed myself at a Starbucks drive-thru, and I don't want to talk about it. But I just had so much fun with the story in this book and these characters, and the chemistry was off the charts. The sex scenes were incredible, and that one scene, forever. Rent-free, forever. I cannot wait to read the next book in this series, because that one has like a throuple situation, and give it to me right now. Right now. We're starting off our top 10. Oh my gosh. Again, they're not in any order until I get to number 5, but our top 10, the first book is Glow by Raven Kennedy. Oh my gosh, you guys have heard me talk about the series so much over the last few months because I have been absolutely obsessed with it, but this series is so fucking good. This is a King Midas retelling of a girl that is gold-touched. Her name is Arin, and she has kind of sheltered herself away in this big castle with the king, King Midas, as a way to protect herself from the trials of her past. And this is a story of her kind of breaking those bonds and chains that she so willingly put herself in and coming into her own and really figuring out who she is. It's hard not to talk about the series as a whole because there's a lot of stuff that goes down from book 1 to where I was in book 4, but there are so many things that happen that are twists and turns and so incredible to see on the page. The first book was not my favorite in the series by any means. I gave it 3 stars, but after that, the rest of the books in the series have been 4 and 5 stars, and I've been so excited to continue to read the series. They are so freaking good, and I'm literally chomping at the bit to read book 5. Like, I literally cannot wait. The romance that is at the center of the story, gag me right now. Oh my god, I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Like, he is one of, if not top tier book boyfriends. I can't say anything about him because I don't want to spoil the series for you, but oh fuck, it's so good. It's so good. And I just, I'm so mad at myself for pushing the series off for so long because I didn't love book 1, but now that I have read on to the series, amazing, amazing. And if you haven't picked it up or you only read book 1, please trust me, it gets so much better. I know people hate when you know, you get told it gets so much better after book 1, but it really does. Book 1 is a setup and the rest of the series is immaculate. Okay, number 9 is another Ali Hazelwood. 2 times on this list, yes, and I'm not mad about it. This book is incredible, and that is Bride by Ali Hazelwood, of course. I loved it. This reminds me of the nostalgic, like, Twilight days. Something about this story felt so fun and fresh, but still leaning on the typical, like, tropes of a vampire werewolf story that I just had so much fun with. This one follows Misery and Lo. And Misery is the daughter of the most powerful vampire in existence, and Lo is the alpha of the wolf pack that he controls. And their alliance has been on the precipice of breaking for quite some time, and it is very imperative for things to get on the right track. And they decide to arrange a marriage between the alpha and the vampire's daughter, Misery and Lo. However, they hate each other. Mortal enemies. Neither one likes the other one, but Misery is going in with some ulterior motives because there is somebody in her life that she wants answers on, and Lo is the only way to get them. And so they have a very tumultuous relationship, a very intense relationship, because Misery is forced to go live with the werewolves, and obviously no one around her is rooting for her because she's a vampire, but somehow, the chemistry between the 2 characters becomes so palpable that they cannot deny the attraction between the 2 of them. It just turns into something so fun and fast-paced that I had such a great time with it. It's one of those books that feels in the moment like, oh wow, this is so silly and fun, but for some reason it left such a lasting impact on me, and when I finished the book, I was like, oh yeah, that's gonna be in my favorites. I read it many months ago and has still continued to be in my favorites of the year list, and I'm so excited that I read it. Ali Hazelwood knows what she's doing, and the fact that she took a dip into a different genre and still managed to make it incredible is a testament to her. Okay, up next we have another Catherine Cowles on this list, and that is Fractured Sky, the last and final book in the Tattered and Torn series. I had mixed feelings about the series as a whole. I really enjoyed book 1. Some of the middle books were iffy, but the 5th and final book in the series was so good. And this one follows Shiloh and Ramsey, both with very tortured pasts. You meet Shiloh at the very start of this series. She is kidnapped when she was very young, and she is saved eventually, but she definitely has some underlying trauma from everything that happened in her time in captivity, and she has never been the same. Everything about her life has changed since she was kidnapped, and she's been very coddled and sheltered by her parents and her family because they only want her to be safe, but she really is being so suffocated by the life that they've built around her, and that she's willingly let them build around her to keep her safe. And this is the story of her finding love with Ramsey, who has had a tortured past. He was very much known in this community for having ended up in jail. His record was eventually expunged, is that the word I'm looking for? And he has a clean record, but it has definitely left a tainted mark on his life. And everything that happened to him while he was in jail obviously still holds a very significant part of his life, and the 2 of them find solace in each other. They both really don't like people and find very much a peace and comfort in animals, and that is how they originally start their friendship that then turns into a very beautiful, wholesome, incredible romance that was just so beautiful to watch. You saw 2 people that really needed somebody in their life to look after them and take care of them, and they find that in each other, but they also find that in these 2 boys that end up on the property after something terrible happens to them. And the relationship between this little found family group between the 4 of them was just so beautiful to watch, and I loved every second of it. Something about the way that Catherine Cowles wrote this last and final book felt very reminiscent of the Lost and Found series, which I read and loved, and so I just fell in love with the story and these characters, and of course I cannot wait to read more from this author. Okay, sitting at number 7 is our first Abby Jimenez of the list, and that is Life's Too Short by Abby Jimenez. Oh my goodness, what an emotional ride. Obviously, from the title of the story, you can kind of figure out that's going to be a relatively emotional one. This one follows Vanessa, and she unexpectedly comes into fame as a YouTube personality after she shares her experience with losing members of her family to ALS, knowing that she also carries the gene for ALS. And she is very much lives her life to the fullest, has nothing that holds her back because she doesn't know how long her life is going to last. And with a turn of fate, she ends up as a single parent to her sister's child after her sister is going through a very rough patch, and her next door neighbor turns out to be a baby whisperer, and his name is Adrian Copeland. He is somebody that we met previously in the series. He's a lawyer, a very well-known hotshot lawyer, and is very good at his job, but they end up spending so much time together as friends because they both just need somebody in their life to lean on and to listen to and to kind of hear more about their lives. And with Vanessa's outlook on life, she doesn't want to fall in love. She doesn't want to leave anybody with that burden of not being able to know when her last days are. And so it's a very emotional romance between the two of them where they find solace in each other in ways that are very unexpected. And Abby Jimenez writes such poignant and emotional stories that feel so real to everyday people that you would see on the street or talk to, but definitely feels very romantic when she writes a story that has so much intense chemistry between two characters that you can't deny the fact that they should be together. And something about the way that the story was written and the characters and the way that they fell in love with each other and the way that they pushed each other to be better in their lives was just so beautiful. It was definitely emotional. It got me at the end. There were many a tear, but I just love the story so much, and I know that Abby Jimenez can write some incredible stuff. Okay, our last book before we get into the top 5, we have number 6, and that is Bring Me Your Midnight by Rachel Griffin. This book has stayed at the top of my list for such a long time. I really enjoyed this book. I have read now 3 of Rachel Griffin's work, and I have loved every single one, so it's not a surprise that I love this book, but oh my gosh, was it so good. This one is a lush and atmospheric fantasy romance with a forbidden love at the center between 2 children of rival clans that fall in love with each other. They are 2 witch clans, ones that want very different things for the world that they live in and will go about any means necessary to get it done. And even though they know that they shouldn't be in love with each other or keep seeking each other out, they somehow are fighting each other in the center of each other's orbit and cannot seem to break away. And something about the way this book was written and the magical aspect to it was so entrancing that I could not put the book down. The quotes in this book were absolutely phenomenal, and literally watching these 2 characters fall in love with each other in a scenario where you know there's going to be very dire consequences just felt so magical. And it's like one of those things when you fall in love, like the butterflies in your stomach and the magical feeling of it all. It felt very centric for their relationship with so many stakes at the forefront of it all, and I just loved every moment of the story. It was very lyrical, it was very beautiful. Like I said, the quotes in the story were top tier, and I just cannot wait to read more from this author. I feel like every book that I read, I fall more and more in love with her writing and her storytelling, and it makes me so excited for what she's going to put out next. Okay, it's official. We're moving into our top 5. This video is so long, so I appreciate anyone that has stuck through this entire video. Oh my goodness. But let's talk about my top 5. Number 5 is Ever After Always by Chloe Leese, the 4th book? Correction, the 3rd book in the Bergman Brothers series. Oh my gosh. This is one of those books that I read and I feel like it healed me in ways I didn't know I needed to be healed. This book follows Freya and Aiden, and they are on the cusp of a divorce. They have been married and in love for so long, but things have just not been going right. And there is a big divide between their relationship that has a lot to do with becoming parents, and they are really struggling to communicate with each other and find ways to move past this very large hole in their relationship that they cannot seem to fill with each other, when in the past, over the last 10 years of marriage, they have had no problems communicating with each other. But these 2 characters have a lot of healing to do and a lot of things that need to be mended before they can get back to where they were before. And they are forced to go on a family trip, even though things are not going well, to celebrate their parents' anniversary. And during that time, they are trying to put the pieces of their relationship back together while there are some secrets that are drifting them apart. And oh my God, this book was so good. It was so emotional. It was so incredible. The representation in here for men's mental illness is top fucking tier. Every time Chloe Leese writes a book, she writes representation like nobody's business. And something about the way that this book was told and the emotional, raw feelings that were pulled from each character was so phenomenal, and I just loved it so much. I feel like men's mental health is not talked about nearly as much as women's mental health, and even in that same vein, mental health is still a very taboo thing. I feel like it's very much becoming more open and people are talking about it much more, but it's still something that I feel like people struggle with talking about, and this book just brings it all to the forefront, talking about therapy and the things that help you cope with anxiety and OCD and all of the things that make us human beings and how we cope with that in a therapy setting was so beautifully talked about, and the communication between the two characters was so incredible, and I just loved every moment of this book, watching them build the pieces back up and fall in love with the old versions of themselves and the new versions of themselves was so incredible. It was so incredible. I could cry just thinking about how beautiful this book was, and I think that as a person that has been married for several years, it's so hard. Marriage is so hard. And to see somebody write a marriage that is hard and not just all of the beautiful, fluffy things about it was just so incredible to read. And I think that's why it has had a lasting impact on me. Sitting at number 4, is anyone surprised? It's another Catherine Cowles book. I fucking love this author. She does something in her romantic suspense books that feels so palpable and lasting that I just love them so much. And this one is Shadows of You by Catherine Cowles. This is the 5th book in the Lost and Found series and my favorite of the series as a whole. I stand corrected, I can never remember the numbers of the series, but this is actually book 4 in the Lost and Found series, but it's still my favorite. And I think you can see from this list, I love a good tortured hero and heroine, and seeing them overcome their own mental battles to find love with each other, and this book is no exception. This one follows Aspen and Roan, and Aspen is looking for a new fresh start after some very troubling things in her past, and she wants nothing more than to keep her daughter safe. And so she ends up in this small town looking for quiet and refuge and safety. And along comes Roan. He is a very, very tortured hero. In the past, you meet him in book 1 where he was accused of something that he was cleared of, but the stain has held on his reputation till this day, and he's very much the pariah of this town. Nobody really likes him. Many people are so scared of him, and so he has kind of absorbed those feelings of the town into himself and thinks very lowly of himself. But when Aspen needs help with a deer that is hurt on her property, they end up becoming very fast acquaintances, friends, and then lovers. And the way that Roan loves Aspen's daughter Katie, I will never forget reading this book and seeing how much he loves her. As hard and broody and stony as he is, he melts for that little girl, and fuck, it breaks me in every way, shape, and form. Like, oh my god, it's so beautiful the way that they loved each other as a family, as individuals. It was just so beautiful, and seeing Roan and Aspen really break out of their shells and heal together was incredible. Of course, there's some romantic suspense aspects of this story, as all of her stories usually have, and again, that was amazing, top tier, incredible. The chemistry was just incredible. Everything about this book was so beautiful, but I think for me, the lasting experience that I had from this book was the relationship between Katie and Roan, and the way that they grew to love each other was just, oh my god, it was amazing. And I will forever think of this book and remember the feelings that it gave me. I remember closing the book and still sobbing because I could not get over the emotions that I was feeling for these characters. So top tier, amazing Catherine Cowles. I need to reread this one. Okay, let's talk about our second Abby Jimenez on this list, and I feel like everyone's going to be talking about this one this year, and that is Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. This book was so freaking good, and it's so good that I of course had to put it in my top 3 spot of the year. I loved this book so much. This book follows Justin and Emma, and they both have something very similar that's happened in their lives that feels a little too similar to be a coincidence. And that is that every person that they've ever dated, when they inevitably break up, that person goes on to find the love of their life. And so Justin posts about this on Reddit, and the Reddit post goes viral, and Emma ends up seeing it, and she reaches out to him and she's like, funny story, the same thing happened to me. So they comprise a plan where they will fake date each other to cancel out their curses so that when they inevitably break up, they will find their happily ever after. You all know where this is going, right? Right. They end up falling in love with each other, and oh my god, was this book so fucking good. The emotional aspect of this book was beyond phenomenal. This one definitely feels like something that I would put next to like an Emily Henry or even like an Ashley Poston, where they write books that are very romantic and very swoony in nature, but definitely deal with some more real world family aspects, and this book is definitely the case for this. Emma has a very tumultuous relationship with her mother that comes into very much the forefront of the story, that feels very palpable and real and makes these characters feel like actual real people. But Justin is just so enamored by Emma, and he is the epitome. If he wanted to, he would, because he just does everything for her. He crosses a freaking big plot of ocean or lake, whatever it is, a lake, to get to her in her time of need. And just something about this man doing everything possible to show Emma that she is loved and cared for and wanted is just Oh, it's amazing. It's top tier. It's incredible. I cried. I laughed. I had the best time. There's a twist in this book that had me on the edge of my seat. And I just love this series and this book so much. And Abby Jimenez as a writer is fucking top tier. All right, my foot is asleep, but we are at the final 2 books for this video. Book number 2 on the list is This Could Be Us by Miss Kennedy Ryan. You guys know how much I love Kennedy Ryan, and I'm not going to lie to you. This top spot was rough, and the fact that she didn't make it in hurts my soul a little bit. Hurts my soul that she's not number 1, but number 2 is not too damn bad. And this one is such a wonderful story about characters finding the new versions of themselves and finding new versions of themselves in other people and individually. And I just loved this book so much. But this one follows Soledad and Judah. Soledad is going through a very tough time at the beginning of the story. She finds out some very pertinent information about her now husband, and that turns her world on an axis. And after everything comes to light and the fallout of that, she's left as a single mom to 3 girls and very low on money and funds. And she meets a man named Judah who has a very intense connection to her now ex-husband, and they know that they should not form any type of connection based off of the past and all of the craziness that has happened between them, but something about the 2 of them together, they just know that they cannot deny it. And there's a relationship between Soledad and Judah over a long period of time as she tries to figure out how to build up her new life with being a single mom to 3 girls and finding love in an unexpected place. And oh my god, this book was just so beautiful. I feel like Kennedy Ryan does something so fucking special in her books when it comes to writing strong female characters that can get through the hardest of times without a partner, because I think that's so important. That Soledad really does come into her own well before she decides to enact in any type of relationship with Judah. She is really just trying to figure out how to stand on her own and be the strong boss-ass female that she needs to be and an incredible mom to her children. But something about the way that they kind of like just mesh together and build this intense chemistry and relationship that feels so incredible is just top tier. I love Kennedy Ryan so much. She writes books like nobody else, and every time I pick up a new release from her, I am blown away by the capabilities that she has to write such intense and incredible and wonderful characters. Okay, besties, this is it. Number 1, my number 1 book of 2024. Are you ready? Can you guess it? It's Funny Story by Emily Henry. I love this book. I love this book so much. Now, I know so many people didn't love this book as much as some of her others, and I'm not gonna lie, every time Emily Henry has published a book, it has ended up in my favorites list. But something about this particular story just hit something inside of me that changed the way that I think about romance books. And I don't know, I just loved it so freaking much. This one is another one of those interesting kind of setups for a book, but something about the overall outcome of the story just worked so well for me. So this one follows Daphne and Miles, and they are in a very interesting situation. Both of their significant others have found love in other places, in fact, with each other. So Miles and Daphne are both single, heartbroken, and watching their significant others fall in love with each other and get married, which is absolutely crazy and diabolical to even think about. But when Daphne finds out that her now ex-fiance is kicking her out of their home, she has nowhere to go, so she ends up shacking up with Miles, and they become just regular old roommates just trying to survive the day. But when they get an invitation to their ex's wedding, they decide to do a little sneaky fake dating, and it is a fake dating roommates romance from there. And that is just the surface level of this story. There is so many things happening in the underbelly of this romance that just felt so incredible to watch play out. We have some familial things that are going on. We have the ability to trust and love new people as they have been so heartbroken and so completely blindsided by the choices of their previous partners. And watching these 2 characters struggle bust through life and find solace in each other was just so incredible. And there's something that I love about writing where if an author brings something up at the beginning of the book and somehow it ties back in at the end, it works for me every fucking time. And Emily Henry did this in a way where I had to go back and re-listen to the last 5 minutes of this book 5 times. And oh my god, it was just so beautiful. I loved watching these 2 characters fall for each other. I loved watching Miles do all the things that he was doing to become the person that Daphne wanted and needed him to be, while Daphne becoming the person that Miles needed as well. It was so beautiful. It was so incredible. There were some incredible lines in here, some incredible jokes in here. I laughed, I cried, I had a great time. It was absolutely phenomenal, and something about this story, as soon as I read it, I knew it was going to be my number one, and that it was very slim that anything can beat it. And here we are at number one with Funny Story by Emily Henry, and it was so good. Besties, I don't know how long this video is. I'm gonna be real honest with you. I have no idea how long this video is. I cut this video in half while filming, and I'm already at 44 minutes for part 2, so I'm so sorry. I hope that you enjoyed the video. I hope that you got some recommendations of books that you haven't yet read that you are wanting to read. And if you've read any of these and these are also some of your favorites or not, feel free to leave me all of that information down in the comments below. And if you are willing to share, I would love to know some of your favorites of 2024. I would love to know what you read that just left a lasting impact on you that you're going to remember for many, many years to come. I am always looking for some good recommendations, and if you love them, I'm sure I'm going to as well. But that is the end of this video. If you made it to the end and do know anything else to comment, leave any type of positive emoji, whether that's a smiling emoji, a thumbs up, a heart, whatever feels positive to you as we kick off the first of the end of year content from me. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to watch this video. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to give it a big thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe before you leave. And of course, leave any comments, questions, suggestions in the comment section below. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.
Thanks, baby. Turn it down.